I'm so excited! I was dreading this game's release after I committed to doing a full review, and I'm very pleased to report that after spending almost 30 hours with it over the course of just a few days, I'd happily hop back into it, especially if they added more content. We're not going to waste any time, so before I get into it, let me just say there will be a spoiler warning before we get into the spoiler section, so no need to worry about that. I won't be discussing anything that wasn't in the trailers in this first section. Before we get to it proper, I guess I'll make a quick TLDR. The game takes some time to get going, but if you're a fan of the Arkham series, you'll be a fan of this, so please give it a try. If you're on PC. I cannot speak to the state of the game on console, and performance-wise, it might be unplayable. That being said, let's get to it, shall we? Gotham Knights, the story of who would be the one to defend Gotham should its Dark Knight fall. Well, it's none other than the Bat family, of course, at least some of them. We have as our cast Barbara Gordon as Batgirl, Jason Todd as the Red Hood, Dick Grayson as Nightwing, and Tim Drake as Robin. Just in case there's any confusion, you may hear me refer to them as Babs, Dick, Tim, and Red. It's just my preferred way to abbreviate each character. The four characters themselves take a bit of time, both story and gameplay wise, to come into their own, but as you progress, unlocking new abilities and spending more time with each of them, as they process the loss of their mentor, they become better and better as they begin to truly differentiate themselves. They each have a distinct nature to them, and you're likely to find one that serves you best just by playing them. Red is a powerhouse brawler who loves a straight fight, being the strongest of all of them, being able to take down multiple very strong opponents in combat in quick succession. Line them up and knock them down. If you just want to get into the thick of it, he's your guy. On the other end of the spectrum is Robin, who's about as pure stealth as it gets in this game, with multiple unique ways to quietly subdue enemies, as well as being able to do it faster than his teammates, allowing him to take out far more from stealth, shifting the odds into his favor should a fight break out. Alongside his ability to move quickly and quietly and being harder for enemies to see, he's your subtle option. Moving on to Babs is where you'll find more of an in-between option. She prefers to use her gadgets to get an edge on her opponents, and while she can't corral herds of enemies like Red can, if you can isolate an opponent, she's absolutely devastating when given one-on-one fights. This makes her great for boss fights. Last but certainly not least is our leader in Nightwing, whose acrobatic skills let him dance through encounters, with many of his abilities being more related to elevating the team around him than doing massive damage himself. That being said, his maneuverability makes him great fun in combat. There's certainly no wrong way to play, although I advise avoiding Robin when it comes to boss fights, as it can make them rather difficult when playing solo. As far as the story is concerned, I was a little taken out in the first few hours. The opening cinematic is gripping and sets the tone well, but the first few missions don't really live up to the story that it tells. However, if you're willing to give it some time, it really opens up. The biggest problem I had with the game to start was that I was treating it like another Arkham game, set around one incredibly interesting character in Batman who's always the center of attention for both the audience and his villains. I'll discuss it more thoroughly in spoilers, but suffice it to say that these are different characters and their story is told differently. This isn't a negative at all. I just feel personally I had to take a step back and understand what story they were trying to tell rather than comparing it to my expectations, much like with the game's combat. This isn't a 10 out of 10 experience, however, and while we're still before the spoiler warning, I need to discuss some of the issues that I had that really hold the game back. To start right off, the game has been limited to 30 FPS on both PS5 and Xbox One X. You know what it's like trying to say Xbox One X? Microsoft, get your marketing together. So, if 30 FPS is a turn off for you the way it would be for me, then I have to recommend that you simply don't buy it. In my opinion, a 30 FPS target, let alone cap, is completely unacceptable in 2022, and while I simply have not played it, I can't recommend that experience. That being said, the performance on PC is a solid indicator of why they targeted 30 FPS on consoles. On my system, with the specs listed for you, which isn't cheap by any means, I ran the game at 1440p high preset with motion blur off and struggled to maintain 60 FPS with frequent frame drops plaguing me. I eventually disabled both bloom and chromatic aberration, along with lowering crowd density and draw distance to medium in order to maintain a steady frame rate around 80 FPS, with drops down to around 55 still noticeable but not unbearable. This is without even discussing ray tracing, which for the most part was borderline unplayable for me, as you can see here in this side-by-side comparison I did with Red Hood. Again, in my opinion, this level of performance is completely unacceptable. You know I'm a Cyberpunk 2077 fan, and to be getting 100 frames less here with lower settings in a game that absolutely does not look as good as Cyberpunk is ridiculous. At 1080p, this may be a better experience, but I simply can't speak to it. While not directly related, this also has an effect on your ability to move around Gotham City. At least, I'm guessing it does. Let me explain. You'll be given the bat cycle to traverse Gotham streets, but aside from being ugly and terrible to control, it just doesn't move very fast. I can best attribute this to the frame drop you see when moving across the city at even the paltry speeds that the bike offers. I have no proof of this, but I would guess that they limited its speed in order to put a cap on already poor performance. What this means is that you'll spend most of the game getting around by grappling from one location to the next, occasionally jumping to pick up speed where you can. Later in the game, you'll be able to use your cape to glide on Babs like Batman did, use a slow, awkward flying thing on Dick, run on magic with Red, I mean that literally, or teleport very short distances very slowly as Robin. Honestly, it's terrible, you're just never going to use it. But none of these can compare to zipping around Gotham as Batman. Even with fast travel points that can be unlocked around the city, it's just not fun to get around, and that often made side content feel like a chore. Another thing that felt like a chore is getting forced to do a bunch of side content, because if you don't, you'll get absolutely rolled by higher level enemies in a main mission. This is another personal gripe of mine, but any game dev that uses gear unlocks to provide artificial difficulty rather than sculpting a more challenging environment is a cunt, and I hate them. Cosmetic uniforms are awesome, and I think the fact that you can put skins over what you're using is great, but when I launch a mission and can't fucking progress because I haven't done enough grinding on the side to unlock new stuff, I hate you with every fiber of my being. There are moments in this game that literally added days to this review's release because the artificial difficulty spike from bringing low tier gear, or in all honesty, just having the gall to play Robin, a playable character, whenever I ran into a boss fight, made me put the game down and walk away for hours at a time out of pure frustration. And this was usually after beating said section. It's not like I was even in the middle and got pissed off and left. I finished it and then didn't want to play anymore. Some fights were absolute endurance sections that came out of nowhere but did absolutely nothing but frustrate me. The first few hours of this game were honestly super not a great time, but I'll admit it was worth it in the end. Alright, rant over. I overall really like this game and don't want to leave a negative view of it for you right at the end, but honestly, I need to be genuine about my experiences, positive or negative, or I'm being unfair to you. That being said, I'm willing to recommend this game if you're willing to put up with the negatives I listed. There's something special in here waiting for you to find it, and I'm hoping that enough people do that maybe we can get another trip to Gotham in our future. The voice acting and the expressions portrayed by our cast were all excellent and certainly helped propel the narrative that could have been something very underwhelming if left to a less capable cast. The combat, once you unlock enough abilities to differentiate your characters, is great fun and a perfect kickback and enjoy kind of experience. This isn't my favorite version of Gotham as a city. It would probably have to go to the Arkham City game. I know, my sentence structure ruined me there. But this wasn't a complete failure by any means. For what it's worth, I'm happy to hop back into this game and probably will sooner rather than later. That being said, I do have a small Discord server linked in the description, so if you want to get a game going, hop in and drop me a line. Either message me or ping me, it doesn't matter which, and we can see about getting some games going. Dibs on Babs. Although I will say, I will be at the Anderson Silva and Jake Paul fight, so not going to be available Saturday. I guess it's time for a final rating before spoilers then, eh? I don't like splitting my scores, but this really feels like a 7.5 out of 10 for me. The performance issues and gear progression hold it back from being an 8 for me, but a 7 just doesn't feel fair to all that it's doing right. I hope this has been enough for you to make an informed decision, but that being said, if you have any questions, leave a comment or reach out to me directly. I'd be happy to oblige your curiosity. That'll about do it. Spoilers will be shorter. I just want to cover a few things about the story and progression that might be best left discovered yourselves. Anyways though, thanks for hanging around. Alrighty, so as far as the main story, I mentioned that watching the opening cinematic in which you watch Bruce and Ra's al Ghul battle to their mutual demise is awesome and does a great job setting the stage for the whole game. I would love to play it for you, but it's like 12 minutes long. The Bat family wasn't even able to be alongside Bruce when he fell and are left both metaphorically and physically picking up the pieces that he leaves behind. This is a great jumping off point. I'll be honest, I don't really want to talk too much about the actual plot because I don't think it affects my review very much other to say that I'm positive on it and I think you'd enjoy playing it yourself. What I do want to talk about is the fact that the whole thing centers on the Court of Owls and it's not my favorite story involving them. You also have yet another game where the League is behind everything, just switching race for Talia. What's far more interesting is how the characters both react to the situation and to each other. Over the course of the main story, the major cases involving Freeze, Harley, and Clayface is where they'll learn to work with each other and clearly become closer over the course of the investigation. There will be spats, but Alfred does a fantastic job at acting as a middleman when things get out of hand and they need a cooler head among them. There's a clear lack of trust in the beginning, with Red wanting to get right into it, Babs wanting to understand the situation, Dick feeling the need to step in as a leader but clearly not being accepted as one, and Tim being the quiet voice in the room just trying to be helpful. It's Alfred who brings them together. It's a slow and very natural process over the course of the game that never stood out enough for me to stop and think about it, which I think is a massive compliment. The real magic is in the Gotham Knights themselves, each one of them having their own mini-story as they deal with the personal issues surrounding the current climate. To start off with, Dick is clearly suffering from a strong identity crisis. He's trying to be Bruce because he feels as though that's what's expected of him. He's trying desperately to being a guiding hand to those who have just as much history as him. He sees his own shortcomings in others trying to comfort those around him because he doesn't understand that while they may be grieving, they aren't grieving in the same way. He's convinced that he needs to be the next Batman, standing head and shoulders above those around him, but it's simply not what's needed. They could use a leader, sure, but he fails to see that being a leader doesn't mean he has to be Batman. Simply being himself is enough, and when he's ready to admit his fears and lean on those around him, he's finally able to become the leader he was meant to be. Next up is Red, who's dealing with an entirely different kind of trauma as he's plagued by the side effects of the Lazarus Pit. If you didn't know, Jason Todd was killed by the Joker and later brought back to life with a broken mind, becoming Red Hood later in life. He's only just become a part of the Bat family again, and while the others seem to be concerned about the possibility of him losing control, those fears aren't entirely unfounded as he clearly still struggles with the burdens of his past. Around the other Cape Crusaders, he does his utmost to put up a wall, trying his best to convince them that he's fine, and seeing him spend time with them is fun the way he reacts in different ways. He's playful with his old friend Babs and gentler than at other times. With Tim, he relaxes a bit when he's confronted with his altruistic nature, even willing to stand up to the scary Jason when he believes he's wrong. With Dick, they take a while to eventually find some common ground between the two, but it's with Alfred that he finally lets down his barriers in a surprising moment. A wise man once said, "Too often we underestimate the power of a touch, a smile, a kind word, a listening ear, an honest compliment, or the smallest act of caring, all of which have the potential to turn a life around." I was touched by what Alfred was able to do for Jason.
The combatants change, the battle fronts shift, but the costs still add up.
Yeah. We both have the scars to show for it.
Bruce blamed himself for your death, and for the darkness that followed. But even in the worst of times, we saw that you had the potential to emerge as a better man.
Some days I barely feel human. Let alone a better man.
He believed in you, and was proud of how far you'd come. Especially after everything you've been through.
Babs faces a very personal issue in the passing of her father. It's not mentioned in the game how or when he died, but it appears it was recent, as it's certainly a raw wound for her. She has a surreal experience of being seemingly the only one who doesn't remember her father's face, with his statue being the image that forms in her mind when she thinks of him. To help, she dives into his old files trying to solve his cold cases in a way to reconnect with her father. For someone with a photographic memory, not being able to remember someone so dear to you is a great way to have a crisis of faith when it comes to your own abilities. With a little help from those around her, like Red and Tim, she battles through the pain and eventually finds a way to reconcile with her past, standing proudly with the values her father lived by.
Gotham has called, and I have answered. And I will never abandon her. And I won't forget.
Robin is the youngest in the group and it shows. He just doesn't know how to deal with this new reality that was thrust upon him. Unlike the others, he just wasn't at the point where he was ready to be independent yet. If anything, he was closer to Bruce than any of the others and now finds himself feeling very alone without his partner. After some heartfelt advice from Jason that grieving would be preferable to trying to solve Batman's death like a problem, he's able to move on but is still left with his own doubts about himself. Thankfully, Alfred is there to tell him it's okay to not know who you are at such a young age. The stories all four of them tell us throughout the game are what really sell the game for me and why I wanted to keep playing it. I just wanted to see the family get through it and to be okay. Outside of that, I just wanted to touch on the enemies you face over the course of the game, specifically about the above goon level guys, the shields, the shooters, the healers, etc. There's actually a pretty solid enemy variety here, even if it's to an extent artificial. First thing I want to get off my chest is about the healing enemies in this game. To start, why does the free healer have so much fucking health? I have to target this bitch immediately when entering combat because as long as she's alive, any damage I do is liable to be nullified, which is fair enough. She's a healer. But why is she such a fucking tank, bro? Doesn't make any fucking sense. She should be the glass cannon. She should be the weakest person in the fight, but it takes forever to lay this dumb bitch out, and I just hate it. And for the Court of Owls assholes who lay down to heal so that if I don't happen to have a special attack that I can hit them with, they regain all their damn health. If you're not going to let me interrupt them, just give them the extra health so I only have to fight them once. The damn Court of Owls shield dudes feel like they have an infinite health supply, and it's infuriating. Last but not least, the sword-wielding talents. These guys are awesome. 10 out of 10. Would fight again. Seriously, they're like mini bosses, rewarding well-timed dodges but not overly punishing your failures. I love it. The League of Assassins to a smaller degree, but the talents just really nail it for me. Well, shit, it's getting late and this is getting long. Is there anything else I need to talk about? Bruce's audio logs being attached to such a dog shit minigame is a shame, but it didn't stop me from recovering all 12 of them and being glad that I did, so that's cool. I was trying to avoid touching on the ending, but in truth, the problem that I have with it is that it's too predictable, so I can probably talk about it. Bringing back Bruce for the last 20 minutes of the game just to make him no tougher than a mini-boss as a precursor to what was actually a pretty good boss fight with Talia was fucking stupid. I'm glad they didn't fully resurrect him, but it was just stupid and unnecessary and I didn't care for it. The Knights were doing a fine job carrying their own story and there was no need to drag him back into it just to have us watch him die all over again. That being said, the memory you unlock after you finish the game is super sweet and I love it. Well worth beating the game. I think that about wraps it up for me, guys. Overall, I'm very happy with my purchase of Gotham Knights, even if it might not seem like it. And I really hope we get some additional content, because I'd gladly play more of it, even if I had to pay for it. I've probably got the Outer Worlds up next, but if you've got something you want to see me cover, let me know. I haven't seen a lot of new releases that I care about for the rest of the year, but if I miss something, please leave me a comment about it. It would be pretty neat if you liked and subscribed and all that, but I'm just grateful for you getting to the end of the video. So thank you. That's going to be it for me, guys. Have a wonderful night, and always remember to smile.
You're always looking out for me.